is not true. If either of the passwords is different than the other, then we cannot execute this method. And finally, we're going to make the same evaluation that we did for the login. We're going to evaluate if string.isNull or empty for the user's email or for the user's password. And if any of this is empty, we're going to return false. And only otherwise, we are going to return true. So we are only going to be returning true if the user is not null, and if both the password and the confirmed password are the same, and if neither the user nor the password are null or empty. Now to the execute method. I am first going to delete the throw of this exception. And from here, I am going to be calling a method that is going to be in the register VM. But we don't have a register VM yet. So I am going to right click on the view model and I'm going to add a new class. This is going to be register VM. Register VM has to be a public class, and this one is actually going to be implementing the iNotify property changed interface, because this is going to be working very similar to the main VM, which implements that interface, has a user property, but also has an email and a password properties. So before adding those properties, I am going to add a private void method that is going to be on property changed, that will receive a string property name, and in its body we're going to evaluate if property changed has any subscribers, so evaluating if it's different than null, and if it is, we're going to fire this event by passing this as the sender and a new property changed event args as another argument. The constructor for this type receives the property name. And now to define the 4 properties that we'll need. Yes, 4. We're going to need a property that is of type user. We're going to need a property of type password, of type confirmed password, and of type email. So we're going to be defining this as full. The first one is going to be the email. The second one is going to be the password. The third one is going to be confirmed password. And the last one is going to be the user. And of course, from the setter of each and every one of these properties, we have to call the onPropertyChanged method and pass the name of the property itself. Like this. By the way, I do have a typo in the name of the confirmed password. And we need something else after calling the onPropertyChanged. Just like on the main VM, we're going to assign the user property to be a new user. And this new user is going to have as email the email property for this class, as password the password property for this class, and as confirmed password the confirmed password for this class. And this exact same thing has to happen from the setters of the email, the password, and the confirmed password properties. There are 3 other things that we still need to do in the VM. The first one, right above the event that we have to define another property that is going to be of type register command. That is the first thing that we needed. The second thing that we also need is the constructor for this class, from which we are going to assign to the register command a new register command. So we're going to initialize this object. And finally, we need the method that is going to perform the operation. This is going to be public void register. It is going to be requiring a user object, and it's going to have the functionality that we currently have inside of the event handler. And actually, the only thing that we need is to call the register method from the user class. Because if you think about it, every time the command is executed, both the password entry or the password text and the confirmed password are going to be the same. Because if they're not, the can execute will return false, so there's no way to click on the button. So all we need to do is call the user.register method. I will get rid of the event handler, and back in the VM, I am going to make that call. There it is. Now, the last thing that we have to do is go to the register command, and we're going to need a private variable that is going to be of type register VM, that is going to be called viewModel, and that we are going to be initializing from the constructor. The constructor for this class, by the way, will ask for a parameter of type register_vm that is going to be viewModel, and that value is the one that is going to be assigned to the local viewModel. Having this viewModel, we can go to the execute method, and the first thing that we will need is to parse the parameter as a user. This time we not only need the parameter in the canExecute method to make the evaluation, we also need the parameter in the execute method because the viewModel has the register method that we have just set to request the user. And we're going to be receiving from the parameter of the command, and that's where we are going to get it, so we pass it to this method. So this method uses it to register the user through the register method in the user class. And because we have changed the constructor for the register command, in the constructor for the register_vm, we have to pass this when we are initializing the command itself. Good. Now to the binding. In the register page.saml.cs file, we have to define a variable of type register_vm. We need to add a using directive, and this is going to be the viewModel. We're going to get rid of the user because now the user is inside of the viewModel, and we're going to be initializing the viewModel itself to a new register_vm. And then we're going to set the binding context to the entire page to be this viewModel. Now we have to bind the properties that come from the register_vm class itself. And we have email, password, confirm password, and user, as well as the register command. So we will have to keep the binding to email because it's the same name for the property, the password, the confirm password, but in the button we have to get rid of the event handler for the clicked event. What we have to set is the command, and the command is going to be binding to the register command. And finally, we need to set the command parameter, which is going to be the user object, the user property that we have inside of the viewModel. And that's pretty much it. It's time to test this out and check if we are still successfully registering a user. Before registering the user, I am going to set a breakpoint inside of the register method that is inside of the VM, and I'm also going to set a breakpoint inside of the register method that is inside of the model. So I evaluate if the execution is behaving properly. So here I am going to navigate to the register page. I am going to write an email address, a password, which has to be the exact same one on both entries. Notice that since they are both the same, the register button is activated. If I write something different, notice that it is now inactive. I added an extra character at the end of the second password. If they are back to be the same, the register button is active again. Now I am going to click on the register button, and we are hitting the breakpoints. So it means everything is executing the way it is supposed to. And here, if we hover over the user, we can see that it indeed has the confirmed password, the email, and the password that I had just written down. And so, when this is inserted into the database, it will allow us to use that new user that we have just created to log in. Just like the functionality that we had before, except this time it's in the viewModel. So this was part 1 of the challenge. In the next lecture, we're going to continue with part 2, solving the only button that we have left,